John Snowden.
My name is Janeta Stein.
I'm Imre Draškovic.
So my name is Mark Turner.
So I'm Michelle Gilbride.
I'm Rhys Walsh.
I'm Dave Horsfall.
Say hi to the team of research software engineers at the University of Newcastle in the northeast of the UK. And in this episode, you'll find out more about what keeps this group of engineers ticking. December isn't really the best time of the year to travel, isn't it? Grey, dark and wet. Still, that didn't stop me from making my way to Newcastle upon Tyne on one Sunday, early December in 2025. Newcastle, as some of you may know, has been hosting the Research Software Engineering Conference in the UK not once, but twice. In 2022, which also happened to be the first live conference after the COVID pandemic, and again in 2024. Newcastle is also home to a central group of research software engineers at the University of Newcastle, and if you know the RSE community in the UK a little bit, you'll find some familiar faces and names there. And if nothing else, I think Newcastle is a very nice town. In short, there are plenty of reasons to go to Newcastle, for me at least. But back to the RSE team. Mark Turner, the head of the group, suggested I join them at their annual away day.
Box inside of it, but then it has lots of different models. So
what's an away day? Well, it's a day when the team gets together as a whole to discuss a range of things, and on that day, one of the themes they went through was generative AI and how it impacts coding. An interesting subject in its own right, which I will return to in a different episode a little bit later. It's also been a good opportunity to see the whole team in action, so to speak. Their normal residence is a very swish and modern-looking building, appropriately called the Catalyst, just opposite the side where the conferences in 22 and 24 were held, for those of you who were there. But for their away day, the team chose a different location on the Newcastle University campus. After all, it's good to get away from the office every now and then, isn't it? Well, the team over the years has grown quite a bit, and it wasn't practical to talk to every single member for this episode. But I do hope the following chats I had with some of them will give you a good overview of what the team's up to. In no particular order, I spoke to Mike Simpson, Dave Horsfall, Michelle Gilbride, Rhys Walsh, Imre Draškovic, Mark Turner, John Snowden, and Janeta Stein, all of whom you will hear from later. And they all bring different skills to the team to cater for the very different demands researchers have on them. To kick things off, let's start with Mike Simpson. Some of you listeners may know Mike. He's one of the trustees of the Research Software Engineering Society in the UK and a Software Sustainability Institute Fellow, not to mention all the other hats he's wearing.
So we've got 4 special interest groups in the team, and I'm part of 2 of them, the data science one and the data visualization one as well.
What do you want to get out of the data science one?
We're sort of looking at how AI can be used in data science in the sort of processing and analysing of data, whether it can help save time, whether it can give us reliable, useful results.
You've been in the Newcastle group for how long?
Since it was created, I think it was 2018. I think I was the first official RSE to join the team, first person to officially become an RSE at the university.
Oh, wow. Of course, you're now co-president.
Yes, vice president of.
The vice president. So how can you wear so many different hats?
With great difficulty. I'm fortunate in that Mark gives me plenty of time to do sort of voluntary stuff, so I have got enough time during my working day to work on the SSI fellowship as well as being a trustee of the society.
Oh, yes, of course you've got the SSI fellowship.
So yeah, it's been a difficult balancing act, but I think doing pretty well so far.
So how does it work then in your daily life? I mean, so how do you split this between the 3 different hats, SSI fellowship, RSE, and then the daily work?
So I've got the sort of 2 different projects that I work on during the day job, and then roughly sort of a couple of hours a week to spend sort of attending meetings with the other trustees and doing stuff like building the website for the mental health project. So I can carve out a couple of hours during the week without it affecting other things too too much. As long as I'm sort of keeping the balance right and keeping everyone happy, I think everyone's fine with that.
How many projects do you work on at the same time?
So it's usually
more than one? Or?
Yeah, it's usually 2 projects. Most of us, I think, are sort of doing a 50-50 split between 2 different research projects.
Is it web pages or websites that you specialise in?
It varies. So my background's in the games industry, and I did sort of a PhD in using games industry technology to build engineering simulations. My sort of background is more in the sort of visualization, interactive data visualization, that sort of side of it. But we do, we have to do whatever projects come through the door. So sometimes there's web projects, sometimes there's sort of data science projects. It's a good mixture.
What are you working on now?
So at the moment I'm working on a project with various partners, including Northumbrian Water and P&G, to look at how we can monitor and reduce water use in people's homes. So we've got these sensors in people's homes, like on every individual device, so on the washing machines and the taps, to try and monitor and show the users their sort of data consumption to see if we can affect change. And P&G are testing out different products to try and see if they can reduce water usage, and we're collecting the data for that. Procter & Gamble is the company that owns various brands, all of the like Fairy Liquid and I'm going to get this wrong, but dishwasher tablets and those sorts of. And then the other project I'm working on is with a group they're called the Great North Care Record, and it's a group of NHS trusts in the northeast and northwest, sort of trying to work together to share patient data and give access to the patient data through a single platform instead of every hospital and local authority having different systems. So they've got data about their usage over the last few years, and I'm helping them visualise and explore that as well.
Mike, I should add, has a very impressive water bottle. If you haven't noticed that already on Mastodon or Blue Sky, a bottle called Feathers. And if you're a fan of Wallace and Gromit, you know what I'm talking about. Well, I digress a little bit. Part of the work that the Newcastle team is doing involves building websites or mobile apps. And of course, a combination of the two. And in the following 2 short interviews, I want to introduce you to 2 of the members who work in this space, Imre Draskowitz and Rhys Walsh. Let's start with Rhys. Rhys was busy that day running a live coding session using Cursor, a generative AI tool, something we touch on briefly.
I'm Rhys Walsh, and I am a software engineer at Newcastle University.
And since when?
Nearly 3 years. In March is when I started as an intern. I originally did business, and then I did my master's at Newcastle University, interviewed for an intern position with Mark, and then interned through till the end of my course, and then came on as a full-time research software engineer in August, September time.
Business, was that an MBA? Or?
No, it's just undergrad business. I've always coded since I was younger, but never really thought to do computer science at the time for some reason. So it's kind of just doing it part-time as a hobby. Worked in renewable energy for a while. Went to China for a while. Ended up there for 3 years during COVID. Yeah, it was during that time that I just started coding every day, 6-7 hours, and then came back and did my master's.
What made you decide to go for research software engineering?
I really like Mark for a start, and I think a workplace, your happiness within a workplace is heavily influenced by the person running the workplace. And then secondly, I'd already worked there as an intern, and I just knew I was happy working there and loved the vibe. It gives me the opportunity to work on products from start to finish. So one of the reservations I had initially of being a software engineer is that someone would do the designs for me, and somebody would tell me how to do this, and someone would handle different life cycles of the product that I would want to handle.
Or even just a component of it.
Yeah, you could very well be working within industry just doing the exact same thing every single day. I was very interested in getting my hands dirty and going through a complete life cycle of products from, design, development, DevOps, front end, back end, using different languages when possible. I think I've used about 10 frameworks in 3 years.
You specialize on web, but you also do mobile, don't you?
Yeah, web and mobile. So I've done Flutter, Swift, Kotlin for 3 different mobile apps, Svelte, React, Vue, .NET, Node.js, just
you name it,
yes,
basically.
Dipping my toes in.
Are you still doing mobile apps?
I've not got any at the moment, but I'm always open to doing them.
I did some at UCL. Well, not really. One. So I think there was always the question about whether you do a mobile app, a bespoke mobile app, or whether you actually go for a web app.
And just port.
Because you run exactly and port it over.
So what's the trend at Newcastle University?
At Newcastle University, you get to pick whatever software you want. You know, there's upsides and downsides to this. The downside being you could take over a project with a language you don't understand or a framework you don't understand. The upside is you, as a developer, get to choose what the best tool is for the job. And I would suggest for anybody interested in doing mobile to do something with like Flutter.
We're at the away day of the Newcastle RSE team, and you did something on AI.
Yes.
What motivated you to do that?
So when you talk to a developer about AI, a lot of times you'll either get, it's like a junior dev, or it's rubbish, I've used it this one time, or I asked ChatGPT to make me a class and it came up with methods that don't exist. And I realized that nobody had actually tried to use any of the new tools. They'd used ChatGPT and like Model 4 like 2 years ago and written it off as not being helpful or not wanting to use it. Currently one of my projects, which I've been working on for 2 years, is in the process of being spun out into a company. As part of that process, I've been rewriting the back end, really looking at performance and to make this into a production-ready app. And in the team, there's one other person that knows .NET, right? And whereas if you're in industry, you might have a lot of people above you who you can talk to and you can pull from and learn things from. But in our team, because everybody knows a lot of different things and have different backgrounds, you kind of need that kind of like mentor or somebody to pair a program with. So I was looking for different ways of doing this, which is why I came across Cursor, which can kind of act as like a code reviewer, another resource, not something you rely fully on, but something you can talk to, Rubadog, generate plans, and get some feedback on code you're actually writing. Whereas, you know, you can go online and you can look at examples and you can look at repositories and you can look at people's writing, but they don't know your exact use case. Like they don't have access to the things that you've done. So even though you're watching a video about this pattern is really good for this use case, they're always like very basic, few little methods, tiny entities. Whereas I think Cursor would be really good at doing code reviews of your actual repository and being used as a learning aid.
From Rees to Imre. Like all other RSEs in the team, Imre is usually dealing with 2 projects at a time. In his case, mobile and web apps. So here he is.
I'm Imre Drašković. I'm a research software engineer at Newcastle University.
Yep.
And I mainly look after mobile applications around the university and the institution and some of our partners as well.
And you've been joining the RSE team since
I've been
when?
here for 3 years now as well. So I joined in 22 April was my first like part-time job with the RSE team as well.
Right, okay.
But even before I was teaching the carpentries workshop with Janetta Stein. So that's how I initially got involved, which was super lovely. Like a first experience, like teaching Python and version control, which has been something that I still do to this day as well. So that stuck with me.
Oh, right. Okay. So you were a student here then before?
I was. So you can see it from our window as well, that I went literally just across the building as well for 3 years. Well, four with the placement here. I did computer science. So I do come from a computing background, and that's how I initially got involved, because I just saw a student job for the carpentries helper and it ended up coming back more and more with Janetta teaching the workshops, and it's been such an experience that I really just wanted to get involved a bit more. She offered to like the opportunity to build a mobile app, which was an application called the Rock Art Care.
What is that?
It was an application that categorizes rock art around Northumberland.
All right, so it was archaeology, history
archaeology. I think it was with Aaron Maisel. So he was one of the archaeology professors. I think he's retired now. He's been super lovely, and I learned quite a lot from him about local artworks as well, from which has been multiple hundreds of years old. Yeah, and there's quite a few of them up here in the north as well. I think there's like a national park around here that you can see them in. There's one big rock art as well in front of the Hancock Museum on the main campus of the university, which was placed there. So he showed me how he was involved with our infrastructure of displaying it on the fields and moving that massive, super heavy rock into the park. And the application was to collect and categorize a lot of their paperwork digitalization,
Was that the first mobile app that you built, or did you have experience
I've had
beforehand?
some experience in my placement year as well. So I did work with a consulting company, mostly in banking, healthcare, finance.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And we did some mobile applications with them. So that's where this came from, that I started working as a placement year, and in my final year of university, Janette asked me that, hey, do you know how to build a mobile app? I said, yes, I do. And here I am today.
So the rock art is humanities, and is that the kind of fields that you specialize in, Joe?
So we are more central. I have a lot of other projects as well in other fields like healthcare.
All right,
So
okay.
I did build an application for the university called NU Sign-Offs, which is, technically speaking, it's like a medical learning form in a digital way. So it's like a coursework submission platform, like very specific to each stage of your medical school years as well, because it's more of like a practitioning logging system that I've done this exercise in the hospital and my supervisor signs it off, hence the name sign off. That was probably one of the largest ones we've built last year. So that's used by the medical school currently. That was a really exciting project, working with an IT team that has like a backend infrastructure, but I was mostly responsible for the student experience of forming the new applications and connecting it to an enterprise system.
But your normal day-to-day work involves working on more than one project, doesn't it? So how many projects do you work on?
Mostly we work on two. So this was half of my full-time hours. So the other half usually, for me, tends to be another mobile application as well. I worked on another healthcare app at that same time, which was just, I think it's now going into clinical trials. It was for transplant surgeons, and it was more about liver and kidney assessment. One of the smart researchers, I think they developed like an algorithm to grade and trying to standardize like these organs, how transplantable they are.
Okay.
So I was responsible for the iPhone part of the application to port this into a mobile version on iPads and iPhones. The NHS mostly uses Apple devices, so I just made them work with alongside that. And I'm currently working on another app as well, which is called the Levantine Dialects. The main feature is localization. So we have to translate a lot of the app's contents into regional dialects around the Levantine area near Lebanon.
Yeah.
And the researchers are currently working up a way of a questionnaire to identify certain dialects around Lebanon and in the Levantine area, to categorize it a bit better and to geographically map them where each region has its own sort of dialect, which is like quite an exciting journey because we have to consider a lot of elements to it, where if we release the app in Lebanon, we cannot do the same exact localization outside of Lebanon in the area for political reasons as well. So a lot of the time we have to be careful to comply with the local traditions and authorities as well, and mostly to be very familiar to each region and country. It's probably like one of the most challenging apps this year.
All right, okay. Is it because challenging because you have to...
It has to work in like 4 or 5 different dialects.
All right, okay.
So we have to watch out for that. And the questionnaires might change depending on the dialects as well.
Yeah.
So there is the localization element where the app cannot really show up. And there we are also building like a backend infrastructure. And I'm responsible for the backend as well as the front end of it, which is a bit new. So I'm mostly in the mobile space, but now I'm also working on the back end. So
that was my final question, how you expand your own knowledge.
That's why I try to not just do cross-platform with Rock Care, to move on to native with Swift, Kotlin on the new projects to learn more frameworks. At that time, with the healthcare apps, there was no need for a backend system.
Yeah.
Someone was providing it, or one of our team members was building it. But with this one, I have to build a backend as well. And that's quite nice as well in my job, that I get to learn one by one each element of it to build out a backend system, like an Android app, an iPhone app. And I'm not sure what's next, but it's been quite nice. I really enjoy the project here.
An important part of research software engineering is programming for and running apps for high-performance computers. Like other universities, Newcastle has its own HPC centre, and demand on HPC services is high and growing, as you can imagine. And so the team around Joe Snowden, who you will hear from next, has its handful. Even more so because at the time we did the interview, a new system was getting ready to come online. So here's John.
I'm John Snowden. I work in the RSE High Performance Computing team. I've been at university for into my third decade now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I've been here a very long time. Started back in the early 2000s.
What did you start as?
So I started out as, I guess you call it a bit of DevOps.
Right,
so it was a bit of sysadmin before the term was even really coined. So it was.
Yeah, I know
it's
a relatively recent name.
Yeah, but sort of system admin, bit of DBA, a little bit of web admin. So yeah, a little bit of everything really.
The university has its own HPC or supercomputing center,
yes,
doesn't it?
Yes, that's right, yeah. So the first HPC system came in around sort of 2015, 2016, a system called Rocket.
Right.
That was our first university-level supercomputer. We'd had departmental systems before then, but that was the first system that the university set up that everyone could use.
Oh, right, okay. So before it was departments, individual departments might have had some supercomputer.
Yeah, that's correct. So relatively modest local facilities, but this was the first university-level big platform that people could use to do really high-level compute.
Is that why you moved then into the RSE group?
Yeah, so when Rocket came round for renewal, after being heavily used for about 7 or 8 years, it was decided that because HPC was so specialist within the university, that the operation of that system would move to RSE, who could provide that level of support to our end users.
Are you the only one looking after the machine?
No.
Yeah, I was about to say,
we have a small team within RSE, so myself and Carol Booth, we provide the sort of the technical direction for the system, but we also have training and workshops as well that's provided by one of our other colleagues, Janetta Stein.
Okay.
So yeah, it's both the sort of the technical administration and end user support, as well as the teaching, the workshops, the training in order to use the system as well. So it's the whole wraparound service.
Yeah, and that's my question really. How do you split your time between all the three of that? Without going mad?
With great difficulty. I mean, we are in a little bit of an unusual situation because the last 18 months has been us bringing on board the replacement system. So this wouldn't normally be how we would operate. But yeah, we're on the cusp of launching the new HPC, intended to go live probably within the next 7 days.
Okay, so this is a calm and relaxed period.
Yes, this is me, calm and relaxed. But yeah, we've learned a lot. We've learned a lot from the operating the old system about what people want, the needs people have for their research. So hopefully when it launches, the community will find a lot of things that they've been asking for.
Oh, right. Is there such a thing as a typical use of the HPC system? Is there something that you can actually prepare for?
I would say at Newcastle University we are typical, untypical users.
Okay, in what sense?
So we have all spectrums of users. We have people that effectively use the HPC as an extension of their desktop for sort of general sort of interactive single-threaded short tasks. We have people doing CFD that are using as many thousands of cores as we can throw at them. There are people doing GPU work. There are people with long-running bioinformatics pipelines. So it's everything really. We have difficulty in designing and running a system that can cater for everyone.
So what about cloud services? Are you engaged in that as well? Because some universities then say, okay, we have our own HPC cluster maybe, but we also support people when they want to use something in the cloud.
The university, as part of their sort of Microsoft package, have got some facility to give users access to Azure, for example. And that's great for spot requirements, for short-term needs. But when we were looking to renew the Rocket facility with the new system, we did some modelling of costs, and it simply wasn't sustainable to do cloud-based compute.
So going back to the team, so you said 2 or 3 people.
Yeah, we've got 3 technical people and we also have support of administrative staff as well.
Is that enough to run it all?
We would like more.
It's a rhetorical question.
We would like more.
It?
I think what we have to see is the take-up of the new system. Because we've got so much more capabilities and facilities with the system, I suspect we will see a larger user base than we did with Rocket. And clearly that will have additional demands on the support that they need. So we're just going to have to see. But clearly, we would all like success with this, and we would all like to see the service and the people behind the service grow.
You mentioned 24/7 service. Does that mean their shift service?
No. So although the system itself is available 24/7, we don't, as university staff, provide a 24/7 support service behind it. No.
Okay. So what happens when something goes wrong then?
So the university is signed up to it's a regional support service. I think it's operated out of Northumbria University. So in general, if there are IT requests outside of normal office hours, they are captured by a helpline and then they're fed back into the university during the next working day. So there'll be things that we could pick up the next day, but no, the university as a rule doesn't provide a 24/7 support.
Coding and looking after machines are not the only things RSEs in Newcastle do. Say hi to Janetta Steen, who some of you might know from the carpentry courses. Teaching researchers how to code is an important job, and for many RSE teams an essential part of the skills they offer. I remember Janetta from a workshop she gave at the RSE Conference in Swansea, I believe that was in 23, which involved programming without a network connection on Raspberry Pis. So here's Janetta.
My name is Janetta Steen. I'm a senior research software engineer here at Newcastle University, and I'm head of training and community.
Okay. And you've been doing that since when?
I don't know if it officially started, but I think of it as a start in 2019, when it was just Mark Turner and Mike. They were the first two, and then Mark got a whole lot of a new cohort of people, and so that was the 1st of April 2019. We all started then, yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
And your remit is training and the carpentries, I believe.
Yes.
But you've got a role in the carpentries as well, haven't you? You're one of the board members, I understand.
Yes, I'm a member of the board, and then I'm also the liaison to the Code of Conduct Committee for the board.
So how did you get into teaching?
I've always been interested in teaching. So right in the beginning, when the RSE team started in 2019, we were talking about offering training as a group. And the carpentries came up as a solution to offer the training. And I didn't know anything about the carpentries then, but I looked into it. I think I might have done one workshop, so I got an idea of what it was about. At that time, the carpentries had an open call for instructors. You could actually get one of these seats for free. They had a limited number of seats that they would make available. And I just put my name down, and I managed to get on. And so I completed the instructor training at the end of March 2020, as we went into COVID.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Yeah.
You were probably the last face-to-face meeting.
No, it was online.
Oh, it was online.
Yeah, they did most of the instructor training online then, but just as well because we went into COVID then.
So what else does your role entail here at Newcastle University?
So until September last year, I spent half my time on a normal project and the other half organizing and training on workshops.
A normal project means coding.
Yes, but since September last year, when we were in the planning phase of the high-performance computer, the new one that we're getting, I went onto that team, and now all my time is spent on training.
For HPC?
Yes. Well, it's part of the HPC offering, but it's not just HPC. So the workshops are the normal carpentries workshops, including HPC. So although I'm officially part of the HPC team, my training is actually much broader than that.
You're also a STEM ambassador.
Not so active with that at the moment, because I spend most of my time with the carpentries in different ways. But I do every now and then, if I have the time and the energy, usually I get involved with the code clubs. Until COVID struck, I used to run a coder dojo. But then after COVID, by that time I was so involved in carpentries that I didn't have that much time anymore. But so I visit every now and then. A while ago, one of the coder dojos asked me to come and tell the kids about what research software engineers do. Because everybody just thinks games, the kids just think about games. And so I went and told them about some of the research software that we develop and the stuff we do. And I told them about the burping cows. which is one of the projects that actually...
You got a huge fan club of that afterwards, didn't you?
Yeah, the burping cows is one of the projects that one of my colleagues here work on, and they measure the methane that the cows actually burp up. So they're trying to develop foods that would reduce the methane. And so, of course, I had to pick stuff that would intrigue the kids.
And
then
I guess it did.
I had one of the kids come and contact me about an internship. He was a GCSE. He did come and do a little internship a week with us, which he loved.
That's great. I remember seeing you at RSE Conference in Swansea, I think it was, when you brought little raspberries.
Yes.
And you did a hardware course, actually. It's not just software that you do, it's also the coding little hardware devices.
So I got a SSI fellowship in 2022 to work on a project called Carpentries Offline, which is running workshops when you don't have any internet access. Out of that also came the mini HPC, so that you can run workshops if you don't have internet access or if you don't have access to a big high-performance computer. So I used some of my funding to build this mini HPC, which is now running. It still needs some testing, but it's running now. And so the idea is that I could run a complete HPC workshop.
Without any internet connection.
Yes, or at least without any access to a high-performance computer.
Dave Horsfell is another RSE from Newcastle that some of you might know. He, together with Mike Simpson, have been very active highlighting mental health and mental health issues in the workplace. Dave's role is quite interesting in the sense that his role actually spans different organisations, but I let Dave explain this in a little bit more detail.
I'm Dave Horsfall, so I work in the role of Head of Biomedical Research Software at Newcastle University, and I also have affiliation with the Wellcome Sanger Institute in Cambridge. I try to be as active as I can in the RSE community, and I'm also lead of the Direct Framework, which is the Digital Research Competencies Framework.
Oh, right, okay. So we're talking about the RSE group here in Newcastle, which I kind of have a mental picture of you being part of. But what you're just saying is that you actually have different hats.
Yeah, I kind of do have very different hats, and I guess my relationship with the RSE team at Newcastle has more complexity than others. So I'll just try to summarise it. So I was recruited in 2020 directly into the centralised RSE team at Newcastle, and I was split 50-50 across two projects. One of those projects, I have had a great relationship with the group leader, and there's been a lot of opportunities. So it has grown. So instead of being split across two projects, I worked on that project 100%. And then we had enough funding to recruit more RSEs to be kind of embedded in that lab.
And that's the medical bit that you just mentioned.
Exactly. So it's a genomics lab, and the PI is Ms. Hanifer. She has also developed a relationship with the Wellcome Sanger Institute. She became faculty there, and she's actually become head of program, and then very recently deputy director of the institute. So she's very committed to the Sanger Institute now. But the opportunity still kind of lies. She's very invested in RSE. She understands the power of engineering and research, and is kind of willing to invest in that area, which is great. So our relationship can continue.
Right, so you're sitting basically on two chairs then?
Yes, that's right. Multiple chairs. It feels like 10 chairs sometimes.
Yeah, I know, because I know that mental health was also an issue where you actually are quite active in the RSE community.
Yeah, exactly. So I had a Software Sustainability Institute fellowship, and that was very much focused around advocacy for mental health, specifically in the RSE community, but I've done a lot of work generally within research, so like speaking to PhD students as well that aren't necessarily kind of working in software or engineering. So that's been a big part. And Mike Simpson now has a fellowship to pick up that work and continue it, which is great. And I feel like that specifically informs a lot of my activities. So as I say, I do a lot of work with the Direct Framework, which is a community research competencies framework. You know, the mental health is a big part of that because we want to embed training and the kind of be able to equip researchers and engineers and technical professionals with the skills to improve their mental health within the roles that they have in research. So I guess that's a unique
angle on the competencies framework, like how can we embed these better cultural practices in. And another thing is that I'm also a co-lead on the discourse framework, which is the UK RI funded project recently for RTP, digital RTP skills. And my involvement there is mainly revolves around the direct framework and my efforts there. So it's thinking about skills and research and what the roadmap of the direct framework can look like to complement all of these efforts in training at the moment. Yes.
Hence the 10 different chairs.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So is that what you expected when you started in 2020?
Not at all, no. I came from industry. It was a very different role. I still focus in software, but very, very different. It was a real leap of faith to come into this role. I didn't know about RSE, and I remember thinking that I was recruited into this role that already existed. So surely there was nothing more to do. It was a solved problem with RSE, and then it quickly became clear that wasn't the case. There was lots of effort and lots more work that we could do in this area. But no, I didn't expect it to pan out like this, and it's been really exciting, and it can be a bit much sometimes, but I'm still really energized by the work.
Yeah, you started in industry. Well, what made you actually go into RSE in the first place, if I may ask?
I have a background in physics, and then I went and ran an open source project for 10 years. That was my own company, and then I went into industry, and I was just very disillusioned with the type of technology that I was developing. I didn't really see any benefit. It was hard work. It was a very intense environment.
Yeah.
It's not that doesn't suit me, but I couldn't see what the value was in the environment that I was in. Now it's probably more intense than it was when I was in the industry, but I still recognize the value that I'm offering to myself, but also like the wider community. And that's a real plus for me. It kind of keeps me going. As I say, I didn't know about RSE. I just saw the advert at Newcastle. And initially, I sometimes make a joke about this, but I did dismiss it initially completely out of hand because the pay was like really naff. It was really low. And I was like, well, I can't apply for that, basically. I just had really tiny kids. I was like, I can't apply for that. But then I remember my wife sent me the same advert again. And I was like, oh, she obviously thinks it's something that would suit me, or like saw something in it that she thought was good. And I actually read the job description properly, and I was like, that does actually sound really interesting. And then I remember meeting Mark in that building behind you for the first time, and just chatted with him, and I got a really great vibe off Mark. And I think he's done a really fantastic job with the RSE team here, of which I definitely still am part of and see myself as part of.
Before I hand over to Mark Turner, the head of the whole group, I want to give a shout out to Michelle Gilbride. Because without someone looking after the administrative things, the organisation and logistics, no team of a certain size can function properly. And so it is with the team in Newcastle.
So I'm Michelle Gilbride. I'm the Operations Administrator for the RSE team at Newcastle University.
And your first day was at the conference in 2022, wasn't it?
Yes, that was my first day with the RSE team.
Oh my God, that was quite tough going, was it?
It was quite good in the sense that it was good to get an idea of what the RSE team do and the RSE movement as a whole.
It didn't scare you away, obviously.
No, I love working for the RSE team. It's a great.
So what does your work actually entail then?
So I do a lot of the admin side. So,
which is what exactly?
So anything from booking conference travel, conferences, booking like rooms for workshops. I do internal requisitions, so recouping the money that the team have worked so hard on projects. I'll, on a monthly basis, work out how much we're owed from different projects and then send out internal requisitions to get the money back.
Is it chasing up money then?
Sometimes it can be, yeah.
I remember that from my time at UCL, that sometimes they had to kindly remind people.
Yes. On the whole, it's generally not too bad.
And finally, it's time to hand over to Mark Turner, who's been setting up the group in Newcastle and's been running it ever since. And in our chat, we touch on how this group came about and what the difficulties are when you grow a team.
So my name is Mark Turner. I'm Head of Research Software Engineering at Newcastle University. I've been involved in the RSE community for a very long time. I was a founding trustee of the RSE Society, and I hosted the RSE Conference here at Newcastle in 2022.
Which was my first RSE conference
ever. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did very much. We had a second one in Newcastle in 24.
We did, yes, yeah.
Yeah, lovely city, but I digress. Since when have you been involved then in the RSE movement?
More or less from the beginning of it getting organised. So my first conference was in 2016, the first RSE conference. Obviously the work had been going on before that and the term had come into existence, but in terms of kickstarting the community, it really felt like it was that first conference.
Yeah.
And so I went there not really knowing too much about it. I'd just seen it advertised and looked at who it was for and thought, hey, that's me. I'd been at Newcastle for several years before that, having different job titles, all of which were basically RSE, but without that title. Went along to that conference, totally enthused by the community, just thought it was fantastic. And at the conference, I think it was maybe a couple of weeks before, made the decision to stand for election to what was then the association, because I was looking for something to kickstart my career here at Newcastle. I realised I needed other things beyond the day job, and was fortunate enough to be elected. And then we used that association to turn it into what became the society.
You worked at Newcastle University before you became the head of this group now. But how did the group actually come about? Did you actually set this up, I guess?
Yes.
How did that happen?
That's a funny story. So I came back from the conference in 2016 thinking we need to start a group here at Newcastle. So I started putting together things like pitch decks and short emails, and my vision for the team at Newcastle tied into what others were doing. I used a mixture of carrot and stick, so it was very kind of selling.
What was the carrot?
Well, the carrot was selling the vision of what could be transformative at Newcastle and how it would be a benefit. Yeah. The stick was basically trying to embarrass the university by pointing at all of our peers in the Russell group and saying, well, they've all got RSE teams, are we not? And trying to do that. And that basically got nowhere for about 2 years. So I was, I kept plugging away, but it wasn't making great progress.
Yeah. Things grind slow.
Yeah, it's university bureaucracy.
Exactly.
It's like turning an oil tanker. And then my boss at the time, Paul Watson, went to the eScience conference, which that year was in Auckland in New Zealand.
Right.
And saw James Hetherington give a keynote speech at the conference all about RSE and the movement. And Paul came back from that conference saying, hey, we should start an RSE team. And I'd been telling him for 2 years that we should do this. So I just had to bite my tongue and sort of say, yes, Paul, that's a fantastic idea. Let's do that. That's what I was really missing, that ability of someone who would vouch for me, who was senior, who could open some doors and take this seriously. And then that got set up, and I was told I could hire one person. That was in 2018, the back end of 2018.
That was Mike Simpson.
It was Mike Simpson, yeah. So him and I started. And at the same time, the university joined the Alan Turing Institute. And that came with a bunch of Turing Fellows and therefore projects. And RSEs were written into some of those projects. So it was that joining of that network provided the seed corn and the first few projects. I had the whole plan of how I was going to go out around the university and shout about our existence, sell our wares, and slowly, organically grow the team. None of that happened. As soon as word got out that we existed, we were deluged with work. And by April of 2019, so sort of about 6 months later, we'd hired another 6 people. So we'd gone from 2 to 8 in 6 months. And then 3 months after that, we hired another 4, and we were in double digits by the end of the year. It was crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And I didn't have to lift a finger. I mean, I was running around like a headless chicken trying to manage the finances and make sure people were deployed on the right projects. But I'd assumed coming into it that I would have to do a lot of marketing and selling and, trying to persuade researchers of the benefit. But they already knew the benefit. They just wanted the service to exist and were using it immediately.
They were just waiting for it to be there, basically.
Completely. Like a lot of groups, it's just been a story of growth ever since. I mean, we started with 2. We're now at, I think, 27, 28. It depends how you count them. There's a lot of people.
Yeah, but that transforms the group and the dynamics of the group quite a bit. I worked for startups before, and suddenly they grow, and you start with 10, and then suddenly you're 50. So how did it transform you, and how did you deal with that?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, there's some practical things, and there's also some cultural things. So I'd made the decision very early on. I knew that leading and managing, you have to take seriously. Like, you can't just wing it and expect it will be fine. I've had examples of fantastic managers and some not so good ones, and learned from both of those situations. And even what I would consider the bad managers were lovely people. So it wasn't just a case of, well, they're not a very nice person. You can be lovely and just not a very good manager. So I knew that you had to take it seriously, you had to learn, and you had to be constantly adapting. And so I made this decision to get it right by that second round where we hired 6 people in one go. We planned an off-site away day for 2 days. We went and stayed overnight in a hotel. When everyone started on that first day, we took them all away immediately. And Mike and I ran through what the vision was for Newcastle. Some of them had already worked at Newcastle. There were disaffected postdocs and RAs that became RSEs.
Right.
Others we'd hired from external, so they had no knowledge of research and higher education. So we took them away to a hotel and ran through loads of sessions, but it was all team building. It was co-creation, so it wasn't me as a dictator saying, this is how it's going to be. I threw up the provocation of, we're going to make this team. How do we want to function as a group of people? What is our team charter? What are our rules of the road when we're working with each other? And so we crafted this sort of set of documents and principles together that was ultimately the building blocks of the culture of the RSE team, how we were going to function as a group. That played out in different ways. It's the tools we use. So we decided pretty early some easy wins, like, well, let's put everything in GitHub, let's use Slack. But these are decisions nonetheless. You still have to decide how you're going to communicate and what tools you're going to use.
Yeah.
But then we also talked about the kind of ethos of exploration that we wanted and curiosity. That's something I look for when we recruit, is sort of that drive of intellectual curiosity. We can teach people to code. We can't teach people to be curious. And so that's
indeed not. No. But how do you write that into culture?
Oh, we don't. It's the kind of thing that we look for when we hire. So we're constantly reinforcing that curious nature of people. We probably all know programmers who are exceptional coders, who you just need to sit in the dark or in the corner of a room and say, build that, and they'll do a fantastic job. But that's not what I think the job of an RSE is. And so we want those people who can go into a meeting room with some academic who might be world leading in their niche area and hold their own and not be scared by that. So a little bit of appreciation, or even a little bit of love for that imposter syndrome of being slightly not sure all the time, is another thing that we look for. Those two things go hand in hand. Be curious, but also be brave and bold enough just to go in and say, yeah, I don't know anything about this, but I'm going to give it a go. That's the RSE mentality.
That's a very nice and interesting summary. But taking 6 people or 8 people away in a hotel and sort of suss things out and hammer things out is one thing. But now that you're 28, that doesn't quite work that way. So how did it transform then? And what kind of steps did you take to actually grow that? Or what steps did the team take?
So I think that is one of constant communication and adjusting your modes of communication, because the things that work early on then don't work later, because, as you say, some types of activities don't scale and actually become negatives. So in the early days when I was leading the team and everyone reported to me, we would have weekly team meetings where it would just be standard updates from everyone, so that the purpose of those was so that everyone else knew what people's challenges were that week, what they were dealing with, the projects they were working on, technical difficulties, political problems, whatever it was. And that was designed in a way that it meant other people could help each other. An awareness of what everyone else is doing means you can think, oh, I had that problem 6 months ago on this other project, this is how you solve it. But as you say, that doesn't scale when it's 50 people. You can't possibly keep an eye on what everyone else is doing. So once the team got big enough and we created some senior RSE roles and we restructured the organization so that everyone wasn't reporting to me and we had these other managers, those individual managers took on teams of their own, and we split by technology area. So we have a web and mobile team, we have a data science team, we have a middleware team, that kind of thing. And those managers initially borrowed that same setup, so they would run those meetings in the same way, but just for their team. And that still sort of worked for a while, because you were worrying about less people, and at least they all worked on similar problems to you, so you could swap technology tips and all that kind of thing. But even that didn't work, because we switched to having full team meetings monthly just so I could disseminate updates. But it just got too big. We would invite people to present at those meetings, and it was of interest to some people and not others. And as you say, they're the telltale signs that things aren't kind of scaling quite well, because I'm a big believer that if a meeting's not useful, you should really look at changing it or cancelling it. Otherwise, you're just wasting everyone's time. Right?
Yeah, I remember that. Sometimes it drives you nuts sitting in a meeting where you don't know, what the hell am I doing here?
Exactly, yeah. So that wasn't to say it was wrong initially. I think what it was just it served its purpose. It had its time, and we needed to change it. And there was also this notion of people sort of slightly moving between technology areas, but being in one team, but being interested in something else. So we got rid of all of the team meetings and changed them to special interest groups and spread them out throughout the week so that in principle, anyone could attend all of these special interest groups. And we still have some people in the team that do actually do that. Our rule of thumb is that everyone should attend at least one because that's their touch point with their colleagues, but there's nothing to stop you going to more. And that is our current setup, and it's working very well. I've just democratized how those SIGs run. So each one has a title and a basic premise, which is grouped around a technology. But the way that they run those meetings and the types of activities they do is totally up to them. So some of them have kept this sort of project updates thing. Others treat it as a training and skills session. They'll collaboratively work on particular issues. All kinds of weird and wonderful stuff comes out. And it's really good to see that it's just sort of proliferating in different ways.
Did you find it difficult to let go?
In some sense, yes. But also the time pressure on myself meant that it had become a struggle to prepare for these meetings anyway. Yeah. And I just innately knew that letting people down would be a bit strong. It's not the end of the world, but that I wasn't doing a very good job of running those meetings. Right. Even with the heroic efforts of Michelle, our operations administrator. So she'd come in a few years before and was helping run all of these. It takes a lot. Once a team gets big, there's a lot of operational stuff that has to happen, and Michelle had been helping me with all of that. But we still weren't quite hitting the mark with what those meetings were for. And so letting go was a mixture of relief that it sort of almost wasn't my problem anymore, but also excitement that I was really interested to see where the team were going to take these sessions, and I was really hoping that it would go well, and it has.
A slightly different subject, but I think it's quite important for RSE teams. So we've read in the news that, at least here in the UK, that UK universities are struggling with finances. Has this changed the kind of work that you do here at Newcastle, that you've been under a lot of pressure? Previously, there was, people were wanting an RSE group. There was funding available. Has this become more difficult?
It's become more difficult at an institutional level, but not so much in the team. I think because of the way that we are funded, we cost recover from research projects using track facility rates. We effectively charge a day rate. When we're costing a project, we'll say this takes 100 days, therefore it costs X. And that goes on the grant proposal, and then the money comes in. Obviously, there's this whole 80-20 split thing where the university chips in for research, but that's a bigger problem than us. Very few of our team are actually paid for by the university, which is perhaps different from other RSE teams. There are some roles that applies to, but we've largely managed without being impacted too greatly by financial changes. Where it has shown up is a mixture of just trying to get things done. There's an immediate sort of extra layers of bureaucracy when they're trying to control spending. So it just takes longer to get permission to do anything. Even if you can evidence external funding, it just takes longer to get stuff done, which is a frustration, but an understandable one. I understand why the university's done that. And then, like a lot of universities, we've just gone through quite a long round of voluntary severance. So staff members have left the university that we would typically work with in all kinds of operational ways. So members of the finance team, members of the research costings team, there's all these different bits and people that you would engage with on a variety of topics. And a lot of them are still here, others have left, but the roles have gone. So even the ones that you still know and are still here, getting responses out of them just takes longer. And I understand why that is, because it's just less people and it's the same amount of work. So it's understandable. So most of the pressure is coming from that. It's a time and
it's the bottleneck.
It's the bottlenecks. It's the bureaucracy rather than straight up cash.
So that means that you are still able to grow. Is that?
Yes. Yeah. Things are harder to justify, which is where the bureaucracy thing comes in. As an example, we had a very large multi-year, multi-million-pound project funded about a year ago. It took a long time to get the paperwork through, but because that's external funding and we're able to evidence, we need to do this project and here's the funding for it, eventually it gets waved through and we hired 3 more people for that. So it is still possible. You just have to make the case a bit more clearly. One of the most obvious things is appetite for risk. So previously, when we were growing very, very fast, the university's hiring processes couldn't keep up with the rate at which we were hiring. So eventually I was able to persuade people, look at our project pipeline, like you can see this looming thing, let's start recruitment now before we need it, so that I've got approvals all done so that when these projects land, we can just go. Now that's not possible. You have to show the money's sort of already been funded before you can start recruitment. And that's the bureaucracy thing. So it pushes things around a bit. But again, I understand why all those things are like that. It's just the world we're living in at the moment, as you say.
Finally, do you see that there's a case, I mean, as teams grow, as RSE teams grow, that there is a case for specialization? So, for instance, I talked to John Snowden, who is now working in HPC. There are people on your team that work more or less in web and mobile application space. Do you see that the trend for growing RSE teams is to actually then have subdivisions? So there's the HPC division, there's the mobile app division, there is maybe back-end or front-end, whatever.
I think so. That makes the most sense to me because generalists are fantastic. And in the early days of the team, that's exclusively who we hired because we needed people who could more or less turn their hand to anything. That's the sign of a smaller, more nimble team. When you get bigger, having those specialisms allows you to do higher quality work in a sense, in that if you're a web developer and that's just the thing that you do and you're not being pulled around to do HPC projects or write Python or like whatever, you're just focusing all day, every day on writing JavaScript and you just get better at JavaScript. And so it naturally leads to people just upskilling themselves through their day job and through the team, and that leads to the overall quality of work going up. I think you want a good blend of all kinds of different types of roles and types of people. This is one of the things when I would consider diversity, a broader definition of diversity being diversity of experience and skill. A good example of this would be people who've come from within academia, from within the university versus people who've got commercial experience. It's to the benefit of the team and RSE teams generally that you blend those different experiences together to do something great. If you hire all of one or all of the other, you can still have a great team, but you're missing out on some of those other experiences. And it's the same with technology areas. Having a multifaceted team with specialists in web, in data science, in HPC is to the benefit of everyone, because when someone knocks on the team's door or sends us an email and says, like, I need help with this project, odds are we've got someone who can help them.
I do hope you enjoyed the little tour through the team of research software engineering at the University of Newcastle. I certainly did. And I would like to thank the whole team for the warm welcome they gave me and letting me take part in their away day sessions. It's probably a little bit weird to have a guy sitting there with microphones and headsets sitting around. So anyway, thanks very much for that. And of course, I'd like to thank all of the people I had the chance to talk to. And if you would like to get featured in an episode of Code for Thought, please get in touch. And by the way, if you do find yourself in Newcastle, then have a look at the Lytton Phil Library. I think it's a fantastic place to go and visit. For next week's episode, I have rather something nerdy in store for you. As part of this new season of bite-sized classes and episodes, I want to talk to you about floating points. Why do they matter, and what kind of problems can they cause? I hope you tune in then. Thanks for listening. Oh, time's up. See you next time. But before I forget, this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons license. See ya.